They said I was gone. A name folded in a flag. A photo on a shelf. A man lost to the wind. But somewhere between a gunshot and silence, something changed. The laws of war no longer applied. Time bent. Doors opened. I wasn't saved by strategy. I wasn't spared by chance. Something was watching. Or listening. Maybe not with eyes, but with presence. And miles away, in a room lit by a single flame, someone whispered my name into the dark, not knowing why, only that she had to. This is not a story about death. This is about the strange, quiet force that carries a man home when every map says he shouldn't have made it. I used to think war was the most chaotic thing I'd ever know. But the real chaos, the one that rearranges your soul, isn't always on the battlefield. It's the silence between two people who love each other but don't believe in the same God. Or worse, when one doesn't believe at all. My name is Staff Sergeant James Callahan, United States Marine Corps. I was born and raised in Cody, Wyoming, a town where everybody prays before they eat and knows which church you belong to before they know your last name. My dad was a rancher. My mom taught Sunday school. I was baptized in the creek behind our church when I was 9 years old. Back then, faith was simple, clean, warm, and folded into the rhythm of everyday life. But war doesn't keep your beliefs intact. It bends them, breaks them, or buries them in sand and blood. By the time I'd done 3 tours in Iraq and 1 in Syria, I wasn't going to church anymore. I still wore the cross my mother gave me on a silver chain, tucked into my uniform, but I hadn't really prayed in years. Not until I met Ananya Rao, the woman who would become my wife, my only family, and eventually, the reason I survived something no man should come back from. I met Ananya at a mutual friend's 4th of July barbecue in Arlington, Virginia, in 2016. I'd just been stationed at Quantico for a training role. She worked in cybersecurity, one of those brilliant Indian Americans who seemed to understand machines better than people. We were polar opposites. She was quiet, logical, always questioning everything. I was all action, no filter. She believed in science. I believed in gut instinct. But there was something magnetic about her, like standing in the path of a slow, powerful wave and not realizing until it knocks the wind out of you. The first time we talked, she told me she didn't believe in God. I laughed and said, "Well, he believes in you, so you're already one up." She rolled her eyes and walked away. I followed. We dated for 2 years before we got married. Her parents didn't come to the wedding. Mine did, but they weren't happy. Not because she was Indian, they were actually excited about that, but because she was atheist. Mom said, "She doesn't need to believe what we do, but does she believe in anything?" I couldn't answer that. At the time, I didn't care. We had our share of fights, especially about faith. I'd mentioned something about prayer or fate, and she'd shut down. Once, during a blackout in D.C., she said, "You think God turns the lights off to test you? I think power grids just suck." We laughed it off, but there was always that wall between us, a quiet, cold slab of unspoken beliefs. Still, love can grow in strange soil. Ours did. We built a life. A small apartment in Crystal City. Morning coffee together. Long walks on weekends. Plans that stretched ahead like roads with no traffic lights. We talked about kids. About getting a dog. About quitting everything and living in the Himalayas someday, me laughing at the thought of meditating on a mountain, her pretending she'd be okay without Wi-Fi. Then Kabul happened. In early 2021, my unit got redeployed as part of the final withdrawal logistics. My role wasn't combat-focused this time. We were there for coordination, protection, and evacuation support. But everyone knew what was coming. Intelligence was buzzing. The Taliban weren't going to wait politely for us to leave. Something was going to break. I remember telling Ananya about the deployment over dinner. She didn't say anything for a long time. Just sat there, poking at her rice. "You said Quantico was the last post," she finally whispered. "It was. But things change. You know that." She nodded, but her eyes didn't. "Why does it always feel like you're walking towards something you won't come back from?" I didn't have an answer. In those final days before I flew out, she barely slept. She started doing something I hadn't seen before. She would stand on the balcony at night and stare at the stars for hours. No phone, no books, just silence. One night, just 2 days before I left, I found her in the dark living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor. In front of her was a tiny brass statue, something I'd never seen before. A blue-skinned figure playing a flute, with a feather in his crown. "What's that?" I asked. She looked up, almost embarrassed. "It's Krishna. My grandmother used to have one just like it. I sat next to her. I thought you didn't believe in any of that. I don't, she said quickly. Then softer, but I don't know. It reminds me of peace. She didn't say another word, but I could feel the shift. She wasn't trying to believe. She was trying to hold on to something. Anything. And maybe that's how belief really begins. When I boarded that C-17 to Bagram, I looked back at her one last time. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just pressed her hands together in a namaste, something she'd never done before, and closed her eyes. I thought about that image a lot during the first few weeks in Kabul. I saw it in the faces of the refugees, in the chaos of the withdrawal, in the prayers of soldiers who had stopped pretending not to be scared. The city was collapsing faster than anyone predicted. The Afghan army evaporated overnight. One by one, our checkpoints fell. Embassy staff were rushed out. Locals who'd trusted us were begging at the gates. Then came August 15th, the day the world changed. We were told to prepare for rapid exfil. My team was deployed to recover 2 stranded Afghan interpreters caught in the city center. We were told it would be quick. We were wrong. We moved out at dusk. 5 Marines in an armored Humvee, 2 MRAPs trailing. The roads were swarming with desperate people, families dragging suitcases, children crying, men screaming into phones. I remember thinking, this is what the end of an empire looks like. About 5 clicks from the rendezvous point, our lead MRAP exploded. I heard the boom, then the fireball lit up the evening like a sunrise made of death. We were ambushed. Gunfire from every direction. RPGs whistling overhead. We returned fire, but it was a trap. They'd been waiting. I was hit in the shoulder. Something ripped through my vest. I tried to stay conscious, but everything turned to static. My last thought before blacking out wasn't about dying. It was about that statue, Krishna, on the floor, blue and silent. And then I was gone. I didn't know it yet, but I was already dead. What came next was something else entirely. When I came to, the first thing I noticed was the heat. Not sunlight. There was none of that where I was, but heat, thick and humid like the inside of a sealed coffin. My hands were tied behind my back, wrists burning from the cheap plastic cuffs cutting into my skin. My shoulders screamed in pain with every breath, and blood soaked through what was left of my uniform. I tried to move. Couldn't. Tried to speak. Couldn't. Voices echoed in the distance. Harsh. Guttural. Pashto. One of them noticed I was awake and barked something at me. Moments later, a boot slammed into my ribs. I blacked out again. When I woke next, I was in what could only be described as a cage, metal bars on 3 sides, a wall of mud brick on the 4th. The floor was wet dirt, sticky and reeking of rot. A single bulb hung from a wire, blinking in and out like it, too, had forgotten how to survive. Outside the bars sat a young man in traditional Afghan attire, AK-47 resting on his lap, eyes blank as dust. He stared at me like I wasn't human. For the first 3 days, maybe more, maybe less, I received no food. Just water. Dirty water from a cracked plastic jug. I was beaten once a day. Not interrogated, not spoken to, just beaten. Boots, fists, rifle butts. Not enough to kill. Just enough to erase whatever strength was left. On the 4th day, they started talking. There were 3 of them, one older, graying beard, sharp eyes, the other 2 younger, jittery with adrenaline. They filmed everything. State your name, they demanded. I didn't answer. A blow to the temple. Again. Say you were sent to spy. Say you were left to die. Say your president betrayed your people. I stayed silent. They hit harder. Eventually, I gave them name, rank, serial number. That was all I was allowed. But they didn't care about the Geneva Convention. They weren't looking for intel. They were looking for propaganda. A dead Marine is one headline. A crying, broken, bleeding Marine on video? That's 10. They staged my death. On day 6, or maybe 7, I was dragged out to a dirt lot, blindfolded, camera rolling. I heard a gun cock. Felt the barrel against the back of my head. Heard a click. Nothing. Just mocking laughter. He's already dead, one of them said. Let them believe it. They released the footage within hours. Somewhere in Washington, a Pentagon official updated a database. James Callahan, Kia. My parents were told. Ananya was told. A flag was folded. A funeral was held. But my body never came home. And I stayed behind. In that cage, something in me started to change. The body adapts first, learns to eat moldy bread, to drink from rusty cups, to sleep sitting upright so the rats don't bite your toes. But the mind, that's harder. That's where the real torture happens. I started talking to myself, whispering old training drills, mission debriefs, snippets of country songs. I replayed conversations with Ananya, arguments, late-night confessions, the way she'd mumble in her sleep. I remembered every square inch of our apartment, the smell of her hair, the way she made tea but never drank it. At some point, I started praying, not intentionally. It just slipped out. The Lord's Prayer, over and over. Hail Marys whispered like mantras. Not because I believed God would save me, but because the silence was worse. Then something else happened. Something I still can't explain. One night, I woke to the sound of humming. Not from outside, from inside me. A vibration, low and steady, like a string had been plucked deep in my chest. I opened my eyes, and the air in the cell felt different. Warmer. Lighter. The bulb overhead flickered, and for a split second, everything shimmered, like the walls weren't solid anymore. Like they were smoke. And then I saw him. In the corner of the cell stood a figure, not a man, not a ghost, but something else. Tall. Radiant. Dressed in flowing yellow robes. His skin glowed a soft blue, not like a paint or light, but like truth itself had taken form. His eyes held galaxies. He smiled. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. I blinked. He was gone. The next morning, the cage door was ajar. No guards. No footsteps. Just the morning sun bleeding into the corridor like freedom. At first, I thought it was a trap, but the lock was broken, twisted off like it had never been locked at all. I stood, legs shaking, shoulders screaming, picked up a discarded AK-47 from the hallway floor. It was real, loaded, warm, and I ran. What followed was the kind of escape only desperate men attempt. I moved through mountains on instinct, hiding in caves, under rocks, sometimes beneath corpses. I killed when I had to, 6 Taliban in total, maybe more. One of them looked no older than 16. I still see his face in dreams. I kept moving, ate insects, drank from stagnant puddles. At one point, I thought about shooting myself, just to end it on my own terms. But something kept me going. Not courage, not training, something else. A whisper, a presence, a feeling that I wasn't alone. After 10 days in the wilderness, I stumbled into a Pashtun village. I was delirious, half-conscious, barely able to stand. I expected to be turned in, executed on sight. But the villagers took me in, fed me, hid me. One old man spoke Urdu. When I asked why he helped, he simply said, "You saw him, didn't you?" That same man introduced me to people I wasn't supposed to know existed. Indian intelligence officers operating covertly in Taliban territory. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't say names. But they knew everything about me. Staff Sergeant Callahan, one of them said, handing me a clean shirt. "We've been waiting." I had no idea how they knew I was alive. I didn't care. They cleaned my wounds, gave me new documents, and dressed me in local clothes. I traveled by night, hidden in supply trucks and fishing boats, escorted across tribal borders with the help of loosely held alliances that only Ra knew how to negotiate. By the time we crossed into Pakistan, I was a ghost. No name, no nation, just a man walking out of hell. Eventually, I reached a safe house in Islamabad. From there, American diplomats arranged my passage back. I was to be flown out under diplomatic seal, unannounced, unrecorded. It had been 47 days since I was captured. I was unshaven, 30 pounds lighter, and unrecognizable to the world. But to Ananya, I was still me. And she was waiting.
I didn't believe in God. I didn't even believe in hope. But I lit the lamp anyway. I don't remember much about the day they told me James was dead. They didn't knock. Just rang the bell, sharp and abrupt. 2 uniformed men stood at my door, one of them holding a folded flag, the other holding a clipboard. Their faces were rehearsed, polite. Faces that had done this too many times to cry anymore. "Mrs. Ananya Callahan?" I just nodded. They told me my husband, Staff Sergeant James Callahan, had been killed during a combat operation near Kabul. His body hadn't been recovered, but based on battlefield evidence and intercepted communications, he was presumed KIA. They offered their condolences. Gave me a helpline. A folder. A flag. I closed the door and dropped everything. No sound. No tears. Just silence that rang louder than grief. The next week was a blur. Phone calls. Emails. Paperwork. Friends dropping by with casseroles and pity. Everyone trying to say the right thing, but all I heard was static. I didn't attend any memorial service. I didn't speak to his parents. I didn't even go outside. I stayed in our apartment, wearing his shirt, replaying his last voice message on a loop. I'll be back before you know it. Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone, okay? The irony punched through me like a slow knife. I wasn't spiritual. I wasn't even mildly religious. Growing up in Mumbai, I'd watched my mother light lamps to Krishna every evening while my father laughed and said, "My God is gravity." I'd sided with my father. Science made sense. Logic was cleaner than faith. In my 20s, I proudly declared myself an atheist. Religion, I believed, was just fear dressed in ritual. But when James died, none of that helped me. Science didn't explain why the world suddenly turned to glass and shattered. Logic didn't hold me at night when the loneliness climbed into bed and curled beside me like a ghost. Meditation apps failed. Therapy failed. I tried drinking, but the numbness made it worse. One evening, maybe 10 days after the knock, I found myself walking aimlessly down 23rd Street, not knowing where I was going. My feet moved on instinct. That's when I heard it, music. A soft, haunting melody. A flute, played live or through a speaker, I couldn't tell. It was coming from a small Iskan temple tucked between a laundromat and a Chinese restaurant. I'd passed it 100 times before and never noticed. But that day, the sound pulled me like gravity. I stepped inside. It smelled like sandalwood and old marble. Inside, a few people sat cross-legged, eyes closed. A man in a saffron robe was singing in Sanskrit. At the far end, there was a statue of Krishna, blue, graceful, serene, a feather in his crown and a smile that looked both mischievous and compassionate. I don't know what came over me, but I sank to the floor in the back row and cried. The kind of cry that has no shape, no logic, just raw, messy surrender. The priest didn't approach. No one did. And for that, I was grateful. I went back the next day. And the day after. I didn't chant. I didn't bow. I just sat there. In that quiet hall, something in me began to settle. It wasn't faith, not yet. Just stillness. A week later, I lit my first diya. I didn't know the mantras. Didn't know the protocol. I just took a little brass lamp, poured in the oil, twisted the cotton wick, and lit it in front of Krishna's statue. "I don't believe in you," I whispered. "But if he's alive, if there's anything left of him, please, bring him back. I'll do anything." It wasn't a deal. It was desperation. Back home, I pulled out my grandmother's Bhagavad Gita, untouched since she passed. I began reading, not understanding much, but drawn to the language, to the idea that every soul has a journey, a dharma, a duty, and that sometimes faith is not about understanding. It's about choosing to hope when hope makes no sense. Every night, I lit the lamp again. I don't need a miracle, I would say. I just want to know he's okay, wherever he is, whatever form he's in. But something strange began to happen. I stopped hearing his voice on the old voicemail. One night, as I sat in front of Krishna's statue at the temple, I heard a whisper in my mind. Not in English, not even in Hindi, but a sound I understood like memory. "He is not gone." I shook it off. But it came again the next night. Louder. Clearer. "He is not gone." I started dreaming. Dreams of James. Injured. Crawling through dust. Dreams of a desert and a door with no key. In one dream, he stood on a bridge, looking at me, eyes full of fear. "Don't let go," he said. "Keep praying." I didn't tell anyone. Not the priest. Not friends. Not my therapist. I didn't want to be told I was hallucinating. But I kept lighting the lamp. I kept chanting, "Hare Krishna, Hare Rama," softly, awkwardly, until the syllables felt like heartbeat. One morning, I woke up and heard the front door unlock. I ran to the hallway, heart racing. No one was there. But the diya I'd lit the night before, which had gone out before dawn, was burning again. I stared at it unmoving. And for the first time since James left, I smiled.
I didn't break out of that cage. I was released. On the 47th night, the silence changed. It had been raining. Not the kind that floods or pours, but a gentle, steady drizzle that softened the air. I sat on the cold floor of my cell, wrapped in a blanket made of fatigue, blood, and fading hope. I hadn't been beaten that day. No questions. No food either. Just the same routine, waking up, measuring pain, and drifting into memories like a man slipping beneath the ice. I had begun to believe I wouldn't die here. Not because I thought I'd survive, but because death required energy and I didn't have any left. That night, the bulb flickered as usual. Then it stopped. Not burned out, just suspended. The air grew oddly warm, and a strange scent filled the cell. Jasmine and sandalwood. I looked up. There, in the far corner of my cell, he stood again. I had seen him once before, during what I thought was a fever dream. A blue-skinned figure, calm as the sky before battle, wearing yellow robes that moved even without wind. He didn't walk toward me, didn't speak, just raised his right hand, his palm facing outward, and looked me in the eyes. That moment didn't feel like a vision. It felt like recognition. There was no thunder, no celestial song, no instant miracle. But when I blinked again, the cell door, secured for weeks with a rusted, hand-forged lock, was open. Not broken, not forced, just open. And outside, there were no guards. At first, I didn't move. My mind screamed trap. My instincts screamed run. My soul, the part one had buried under years of war, whispered go. I stepped forward. No alarms. No shouting. Just the hiss of rain and the soft crush of my boots against dirt. The compound, usually crawling with Taliban fighters, was silent. A bad silence. The kind you hear right before an ambush or right after a miracle. I passed 3 empty tents. One had an overturned bowl of lentils, still steaming. They had left in a hurry. I grabbed a rifle from a rack outside the mess hall. An AK-47. Familiar, worn, and blessed by proximity. I checked the mag loaded. Pocketed another. Then I ran. That night was a blur of wind, mud, and gunmetal shadows. I moved without compass, my only guide the strangely clear voice inside me, down the ridge. Toward the black stone. Hide where the earth splits. At dawn, I heard the first signs of pursuit. They had realized I was gone. I killed my first man an hour later, a scout with a scoped rifle. He never saw me. One clean shot to the neck. No celebration. No mercy. Just necessity. I stole his map. It confirmed what I suspected. I was somewhere in the eastern Ghazni province, near the Paktika border. Tribal territory. Not American-friendly. Not even Taliban-controlled. It was a zone of ghosts and shifting allegiances. I stayed low during the day. Slept in hollows, ate dried beans and leaves. Drank whatever water didn't stink. My shoulder bled through my bandages every night. The infection had started. I was burning up, my thoughts slipping into fever. But I kept moving. Every time I thought I would collapse, I saw him again, Krishna. Not fully formed. Just a flicker. A shadow with a crown of peacock feathers. A flute left in the mud. A blue glint in the eyes of a passing goat herder. I didn't know if I was losing my mind or being led. On the 6th day, I was surrounded. 3 fighters on motorcycles cornered me near a dry riverbed. I could have run. I didn't. I was too tired. I raised the AK and fired. One bike exploded. The others veered. I hit one in the chest. The third ran. I took his bike. I kept riding. My boots melted from the heat of the engine. I had no helmet. Just blinded me. I followed the riverbed until it widened into a stretch of flat, lifeless earth, an old Soviet minefield, now mostly forgotten. The path forward was suicidal. Then I saw him. A boy, maybe 9, standing in the middle of the minefield. He was barefoot, holding a small flute. I blinked. He vanished. But the path he had walked was visible, tiny footprints across the sand. I followed. Not a single mine went off. By the time I reached the other side, I collapsed. Heat stroke, blood loss, exhaustion. My hands trembled. My vision blurred. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I passed out. When I woke, I was in a dimly lit room. Not a prison. Not a cave. A safe house. Clean sheets. Cool air. And 4 in my arm. And standing near the door, reading a file, was a man in plain clothes with the calm expression of someone used to death. He looked up. "Staff Sergeant Callahan," he said in crisp English. "I assume you've had a difficult week." I blinked. "Where am I?" "South Waziristan. You're in Pakistan now. Welcome back." I tried to sit up. Failed. "Who are you?" "Friends," he said. "Let's leave it at that." It took 3 days before I got the full story. Raw, India's intelligence agency had been tracking Taliban movements in the region. They had intercepted communications about an American soldier who had escaped and was being hunted. They had eyes everywhere, tribal informants, disguised outposts, even local shepherds working as soft contacts. One of them had seen me, noticed the cross around my neck, reported up the chain. Ra decided to intervene. We don't do this for everyone, the handler told me. But sometimes, the universe makes exceptions. They forged documents identifying me as a foreign field researcher, arranged transport in the back of a vegetable truck, moved me across 2 borders, 20 checkpoints, and 1 tribal war zone. By the time I was handed off to American diplomats in Islamabad, I looked like a man who had never existed. My first hot shower in 2 months nearly made me cry. My first real food made me vomit. But the moment that broke me was in a dim hotel room with no windows, where an Indian field agent handed me a satellite phone. "There's someone waiting," he said. I took the phone. My hand shook. The call connected. "Hello," a soft voice said. I couldn't speak. "James?" I sobbed. It was Ananya. You don't walk out of hell the same, man. And if you do, you were never human to begin with. The first thing I noticed when I stepped back onto American soil was the quiet. Not the silence of war or the silence of a cage. This was different. It was the hush of safety, of airport terminals and white noise machines and security personnel who didn't point rifles at you. It was the sound of a world I'd left behind, still intact, untouched by what I just crawled through. I stood inside a secured corridor at Dulles, in plain clothes, holding a manila envelope with forged travel documents and a burner phone. No uniform. No flag. Just me, thinner, darker, limping, with a hollow in my chest that felt permanent. I hadn't cried. Not when Ra got me out. Not during the flight from Islamabad. Not when they told me, "You're going home." But as soon as I saw her, everything collapsed. She stood just beyond the glass, Ananya. Same hair. Same eyes. But something about her had changed. Her body looked the same, but her presence was heavier, quieter, like she'd spent time in another world and brought some of it back with her. When our eyes met, time didn't just stop, it bent. I expected her to run into my arms. Instead, she just looked at me. No smile. No scream. No tears. Just this, reverent stillness. Like she was looking at a ghost that had chosen to come home. And in that moment, I realized something. She never gave up on me. Not because she thought I'd survive, but because something inside her refused to let go of the thread between us. She didn't run. I did. I dropped to my knees, right there in that cold corridor. I don't know why. Maybe to pray. Maybe to apologize. Maybe because, for the first time, I knew I hadn't come back on my own strength. She came to me, put her hands on my shoulders, and just held me. I felt her breath against my neck. Warm. Real. Steady. And I broke. The government was quiet about my return. No press. No cameras. Just silence and paperwork. I was debriefed in a windowless room with too much AC and not enough compassion. How did you get out? Don't know. Did you receive aid from foreign intelligence? Maybe. Did you kill anyone? Wouldn't you? They didn't press much further. I was a dead man come back to life, and nobody in Washington likes ghosts wandering the halls. They sealed my case, buried it under non-disclosures and diplomatic hush. Case closed. But my case wasn't closed. Not by a long shot. Because something had opened in me. Something that hadn't been there before. Faith. Not the kind I was raised with. Not sermons and pews and Sunday suits. No. This was different. Raw. Wordless. Alive. A force that had moved through the cage. Guided my hands. Whispered through my blood. And shown up in the face of a boy with a flute and no fear. I tried to explain it once to a military psychiatrist. She scribbled on her pad and wrote down hallucination due to prolonged trauma. Maybe. But hallucinations don't leave footprints across minefields. Back home, I tried to return to normal. But normal didn't exist anymore. Our apartment was smaller than I remembered. The ceilings lower. The city louder. But Ananya, she was quieter. She still lit a dia every evening. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. I just watched the flame dance and wondered how something so small could carry a man across a continent. I found her old copy of the Bhagavad Gita on the shelf, bookmarked, dog-eared, underlined in places. I picked it up one night when I couldn't sleep. I read it cover to cover. There's a line in it that broke me. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death. It is not slain when the body is slain. I thought I understood death. I thought I'd seen it all. But that line, It rewired me. I wasn't the same man who left for Kabul. I was something else now. Not just a Marine. Not just a survivor. Something carried. Weeks later, I was invited to give an interview. Confidential. Recorded, but not for public release. One of those for the record projects the department sometimes keeps buried. The journalist asked all the usual questions. How did you survive? What gave you strength? What was the turning point? I didn't give technical answers. I just said, something opened that door, and it wasn't me. I told her about the boy in the minefield, the figure in yellow robes, the blue skin, the flute, the open gate. She raised an eyebrow. Are you saying God saved you? I looked at her and said, no, I'm saying he heard someone who was praying for me, and he answered through me. That's the truth. I didn't earn my way back. I was carried, through jungle, through fire, through fear. Carried on the breath of a woman who didn't believe in God until she had no choice. And when she whispered my name into a lamp flame, someone heard her. You can call that God. You can call it coincidence. You can call it madness. But I'm telling you, I was dead. And someone brought me back. I slide a photo across the table to the reporter. It's the only one I keep in my wallet now. Me, in civilian clothes, standing next to Ananya in a temple courtyard. She's holding a diya. I'm holding her hand. In the background, there's a statue of Krishna, half in shadow, half in light. The reporter studies it for a moment and asks, do you believe in him now? I lean back. I don't need to believe. I say, voice calm. I'm living proof. Subscribe now and never miss out.